What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, May 31st, last day of the month here. June's busting out all over. And that's what June gets for wearing those tight sweaters. Yesterday, obviously, was Memorial Day, and very relaxing, nice, relaxing weekend most people had. A lot of people really remembering what Memorial Day is supposed to be about. It's not just another day for the shopping malls to get money from you and sporting events and so forth. And it is to remember all those people who have died throughout the years enforcing the American empire on the rest of the world here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room. A couple of quick program notes. Wednesday, June the 1st, Helen Davis Chapman is going to be talking about how J.P. Morgan backed Bernie Madoff. Tuesday, June 7th, Peter Koenig is going to be talking about the coming collapse of the European Union. June 8th, Wednesday, Don Wiskin is going to be back talking about Extendivite. Quick little note, our Friday show is going to be a rebroadcast. Claire and I have a prior commitment which is going to prohibit us from doing a live broadcast. So Friday will be a repeat show, and we'll be back live again next week. All right, let's get into the news here. Over the weekend, all of the candidates took advantage of the Memorial Day holiday to make lots of speeches, and a lot of people are applauding Donald Trump for the speech that he made regarding our veterans and how shabbily our government treats our wounded veterans, and basically came on out and said the illegal immigrants are being treated better than veterans. And he's absolutely right, and we know that legal American children are being treated with less respect and care than the illegal immigrants. We know the illegal immigrants are getting better treatment than retirees on Social Security. And it kind of makes you wonder, just what are these people thinking? Now, of course, everywhere that Donald Trump goes, he is being harassed and heckled by these random mobs, which all have these identically printed signs. Somebody's put a lot of money into this, screaming that his campaign against illegal immigrants, it's all about hate and intolerance. And it really is a rather ridiculous story, and I'll tell you why. I have a lock on my front door, a very good one. You probably do as well. That lock on my front door does not mean I hate my neighbors or that I'm intolerant of them. That lock on my front door means I love the people inside my home, Claire, and they're protected by that lock. Locks do not mean hate and intolerance. And we have a right to put locks on our doors, locks on our data, and locks on the borders. This whole idea that if you are not willing to accept all these illegal immigrants and refugees and let them come in and vote in your elections and everything, that you're some kind of closet Nazi is ridiculous. Now then, last week there was a big stink over Glenn Beck's broadcast where he had an individual on his show that basically went on out talking about assassinating Donald Trump. And Glenn Beck seemed to be agreeable to that idea. And as of today, Glenn Beck's broadcast has been kicked off the Sirius XM satellite radio system for condoning death threats against Donald Trump on the air. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. By the way, as we come up to the Republican National Convention in Cleveland, as you know, the city of Cleveland has been spending huge amounts of money on riot gear and vests and tear gas and clubs and tasers. The one thing they have not been spending money on is body cameras. And they have already announced the Cleveland police during the Republican National Convention will not be wearing body cameras. It's open season on those gosh darn protesters. The police are just going to be clubbing and tasing and gassing, knowing that they're never going to face any consequences for it. Now, there's a story that came out over in the AmericanThinker.com, which is a very straightforward, serious, analytical website. They don't go into a lot of sensationalism. And they're out there saying that Donald Trump is right to think there is something very fishy about the death of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster. And they're making the situation here that if Trump's attorneys ever gave him the same low quality of legal service that Robert Fisk and Ken Starr gave to the American people, Trump would say, you're fired. And they should have been for participating in a cover-up. That's not their job. Now, needless to say, Hillary's minions are all over the blog saying, tinfoil, wingnut, conspiracy, wacko. And I engaged one of them in an online debate, figuring that he couldn't probably find any other work, so let's justify his minimum wage by debating with him. And I basically pressed him on the issue of why the laboratory test in the police laboratory said that there was no blood on the gun Vincent Foster supposedly shot himself with. And this guy came back and said, oh, don't you know they found a wrapping paper with Foster's blood in his car? And I was saying, okay, how does the bloody paper, by the way, you cannot wipe blood off a gun with a paper and fool the luminol test. That was the first mistake. What do you think? Vince Foster shot himself, then walked to the car, cleaned off the gun, left the paper, then walked back in where his body was found. It doesn't make any sense. And this guy really put his foot in it, came on out and said, no. The crime scene investigators wiped the gun clean. I said, aha, okay. Your theory explaining why there's no blood on the Vince Foster gun is that the crime scene personnel wiped it clean before it went to the police lab for testing. In other words, the crime scene is tainted. The evidence is contaminated and would be inadmissible in a court of law. Now remember, normal investigative procedure when you find a dead body is to presume it's a murder victim. Suicide must be proven, because faking a suicide is a very common means of trying to conceal a murder. And by this Hillary drone's own admission, all of the evidence pointing to suicide is now contaminated and tainted and inadmissible. So, according to Hillary's own shills, we are now back to a full-on murder investigation in the death of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster. Now, one of the reasons people know that this is just a continuance of the cover-up has to do with them dragging out Sheila Foster Anthony, Vince Foster's sister. And by the way, do you know that Foster had a couple of brothers as well? They were never talked to. They wouldn't go along with the official story. Only Sheila would. Remember, she was a former DOJ employee, a Clinton supporter. And Hugh Sprunt and a bunch of these other people have pointed out, one of the problems we have right now is the story Sheila Anthony is telling today to support the suicide claim is drastically different than the story she was saying back when it happened. So the story, it's a completely changed story, and they're raising on a busted flush with this and trying to involve the sister and say, how could you challenge the sister? Because the sister is changing her story. Now, there's another article that came on out over at Accuracy in Media pointing out a very bizarre circumstance. Hillary Clinton and Vince Foster were very good friends. There were indications they were also lovers. They worked together at the Rose Law Firm. Vince Foster was one of Hillary's closest friends, and yet when Foster was killed, Hillary just had this complete disinterest. Now, it's a horrible tragedy. We're shocked. I don't want to know anymore. We don't need to know anymore. Just let it sit. It's another classic case of the dog that did not bark. That's not normal behavior. If your best friend wound up dead and there was reason to doubt it was a suicide, wouldn't you want to dig into it? Not Hillary. Oh, it's a tragedy. We will never know. It's a mystery. Now, there's an article coming out from Washington's blog saying that the TV corporate news networks are getting ready to pull a fast one after California. In fact, even before the polls close in California, they're going to be declaring Hillary Clinton to be the presumptive Democratic nominee in order to discourage Sanders supporters from going to the polls in the remaining primary states. And this is a fast one. Now, Hillary's people are saying, well, they've already declared Donald Trump to be the presumptive GOP nominee. What's the difference here? The difference is Donald Trump was so far ahead of his other GOP rivals it's very obvious he was going to win. And he's over that threshold for a first ballot victory. Doesn't mean they're not going to try something fast to get him out of there. But he's in. In the case of Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, if you subtract out the bought and paid for superdelegates and the massive election fraud on behalf of Hillary, they're actually neck and neck. It's too close for anybody to realistically say this is going to be the candidate, other than those whose careers, whose paychecks, whose reputations, whose lofty positions in the power structure rest on pushing Hillary Clinton onto us as hard as they can. They're all totally on board with that. So according to this article in Accuracy in Media, the corporate news networks are going to declare Hillary the presumptive Democratic nominee before the California polls close to discourage Bernie Sanders from getting on out there and casting a vote. That's where it's going. Story coming out of Daily Signal. California still refuses to admit its massive voter fraud problem. And we know that the sample ballots are intentionally confusing. The voter registration cards were confusing. People thought they were declaring themselves independent of a party, and they wound up being dumped into the American Independent Party. And that was not made clear. People are struggling to re-register, although the deadline has now gone by. Meanwhile, Barack Obama has come on out, finally responding to all the massive election fraud taking place across the country during this election cycle. And he's come on out and said that voter fraud it's rare. Don't even pay attention to it. It's not a real problem. That's his response to that. So Barack Obama is already launching that vote fraud isn't a problem ahead of Hillary's trying to steal the White House. Now, we have this new group centered around William Kristol saying that they're going to make sure Hillary Clinton becomes president by putting out a third-party candidate specifically tailored to take votes away from Donald Trump. They're not even trying to pretend that this is a race for the White House or that this has anything to do with maybe opposition to Hillary's policy. They're going to try and divide Trump's supporters to give Hillary the White House. And Bill Kristol is out there declaring there'll be an independent candidate to sabotage Donald Trump. I wouldn't worry about it all that much. Bill Kristol was also the guy who said the war in Iraq was only going to last 2 months. So this is not a guy who's really connected with the real world in any significant way. Mitch McConnell is out there saying a third-party independent is only going to help Hillary. Yes, that's why they're doing it. They're doing it because they are absolutely terrified of Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton will preserve the status quo. Jeb Bush, had he been the GOP nominee, would preserve the status quo. The mere idea that the American people have an opportunity to vote for somebody who will take a different direction is terrifying to the power elite. They never wanted you to have a choice. They wanted this election to be Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton, so it didn't matter how you voted one tiny bit. The money junkies would still get rich, and your children would continue to be killed and crippled in these wars of conquest. That was it. And when people would complain, the power elite would say, we had elections. You had a choice. You voted for what's happening to you. No, we didn't. If we have two candidates, both of whom favor whacking citizens upside of the head with a baseball bat, does that mean we have to accept and be comfortable with being whacked up the side of the head with a baseball bat? Of course not. Now, Huffington Post is caught up in a big scandal. One of their regular contributors, Frank Hugenard, put up an article quoting his sources inside the FBI that they're getting ready to recommend indictment for racketeering in regards to the Clinton Foundation. And Huffington Post yanked the story and blocked Frank's account from being posted. And it's had the banned in Boston effect because the article was already out, had already gone viral. Everybody's seen it. And we're still waiting for an explanation. There's been no statement from Huffington Post explaining why this article was simply yanked without explanation. don't suppose they're working for Hillary Clinton over there at the Huffington Post. Nah, I'm being silly. That's how ridiculous here. But they did yank that article. And that racketeering, that's another issue. It's completely separate from the... Well, no, if I'm correct and Hillary was engaged in espionage, then that Clinton Foundation is part of that scandal. But the racketeering had more to do with foreign countries making donations to the Clinton Foundation and then getting favorable treatment from the State Department. Now, Larry Klayman had a solid racketeering RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation, and unfortunately had the misfortune of being assigned to a Clinton-appointed judge who threw the case out of court without even really looking at it. And at that point, the FBI stepped in and said, we're going to investigate. And at that point, I was thinking, well, it's going to be another cover-up. Anytime the FBI comes on in and says, it's now our jurisdiction, get on out of here, it usually means they're going to be covering something up. But there's another possibility. Hillary Clinton has become a serious liability to the system. More and more people are now starting to look at that Chinagate scandal from 1996, her weak email server, which now the Inspector General of the State Department is saying, no, she did not have permission. What she was doing was illegal. And you have that charitable foundation that can legally accept money from foreign sources as charitable donations and launder it and make it available to the Clintons. So, the longer Hillary stays in office, the greater the risk that the espionage scandal is going to break. And there is such a thing as a strategic removal. And I'll give you two examples. One was, of course, Richard Nixon, who was removed from office on an obstruction charge because the public's interest was getting way too close to what Nixon kept referring to as that whole Cuban thing, which was Nixon's code word for what had gone down in Dealey Plaza, Dallas, Texas, November 22nd, 1963. They needed to have a small scandal to make things look right and hide the greater scandal. Another good example would be Whitewater itself. We're going to turn this into a sex scandal because the public's interest is getting too close to the gun and drug running done by the U.S. government. And this may be the preparations for another one. They're going to get Hillary out of office on the racketeering charge and drop the whole email server situation in the hope that the suspicions that we have had a serving Secretary of State committing espionage, betraying her country from inside the State Department will just go away. It's called a limited hangout. Yeah, we did some bad things, but we're covering up the greater evil. And we could see Hillary removed with this limited hangout. How to get Hillary out without exposing a scandal that can take down the entire government. Now, we're seeing another story coming out of global research saying that the FBI is threatening to blow the whistle if Hillary Clinton is not indicted. There are people inside the FBI who are going to start leaking this information out there. And by the way, anonymity is guaranteed for any information that is sent through WhatReallyHappened.com. Because I won't hesitate to put it on out there. If it checks out, if it's factual, I will not hesitate to put it on out there. So we have this other article over at Aletho News. The new State Department wrote a report on Hillary's email, Why It Matters. And it basically hits the bullet points. Hillary Clinton and her staff refused to participate in the Inspector General's investigation. Hillary Clinton did not seek approval, legal or technical, for her private email server system. IT staffers and others at the State Department warned her against it. Had she sought official approval, the State Department would have refused. More when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about this Inspector General report out of the State Department. Despite the reassurances of the corporate media that this is no big deal, it is devastating. There have been top government officials in serious legal problems for far less than what Hillary has been doing. So we're talking about Hillary and her server, and she had been saying all along it was allowed, it was allowed, it was allowed. No, it was not. That was a flat-out lie. She never sought permission from the State Department. Had she asked, they would have said no. Everybody was warning her against this. Her spin is now that, I looked at the regulations and I decided it was okay for me to do this. Which is absolutely false. Now, as it turns out, Clinton violated federal records laws. One in particular I was pointing out. When she turned her private server over to the government, those State Department emails were still on it, including the classified ones. And under the rules of classified document, when she stopped being Secretary of State, she was supposed to return those documents and make sure they were destroyed. She was not supposed to have them. As it turns out, Clinton did not turn over all of her work-related emails. Several were quoted in the IG report that were never released by Hillary Clinton, meaning there is another source, another set somewhere. Backup tape, NSA, recovered from the hard drive. Now, Clinton violated State Department policies and guidelines that were in place at the time, while saying that, hey, this allowed me to happen. IT staff at the State Department who were raising concerns were told by Hillary Clinton the server was approved and to not discuss the matter any further. And that was a flat-out lie. It was never, ever approved. We're going to take a phone call. Jeff in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, good morning or good afternoon. I was watching, I was on your website with my iPhone out in my car today, and there was a site about a Muslim uprising that went to a conservative, progressive thing, but the story was actually on Christianity.
Hello?
You go to the link on the story, it tries to give you a video or a game on your app, your app store thing. So it switches right into the app store.
Okay, now can you email me the details and I'll hunt that down? I don't want to debug this on the air. I'm having some problems with some of our advertisers who are not playing cricket, as it were. But email me the headline of the story and I will hunt that down for you, okay?
And the email it's right just it's on the page, I guess.
Yeah, it's WRH@WhatReallyHappened.com.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you very much for the report here. Okay, getting on back to the news. There was a story a while back at Business Insider where experts looking at Hillary Clinton's private email server was saying it's like inviting spies over to dinner. And these experts were stunned by the companies that Hillary Clinton hired to build and maintain her server because they were not companies with good reputations for security. They were companies nobody had heard of, like somebody had just put up a business front and said, we're gonna look like we're an official computer company to help Hillary do what she was doing. I can almost picture Vladimir Putin calling up Hillary Clinton and saying, Hillary, this is Brian, I need your password again. And Hillary says, oh, come on, Brian, you know my password is 123456. That's how wide open this stuff was. Now, here is where it starts to get a little bit dark. The Obama administration has just filed a motion to block Judicial Watch from deposing Hillary Clinton. And we don't know what the justification is, but the White House is now saying we do not want Judicial Watch to depose Hillary Clinton. This is a flashing neon sign blinking cover up, cover up, cover up, cover up, cover up. More than that, if I am correct that Hillary Clinton was using her weak private email server to deliver the nation's secrets to foreign governments and individuals who then paid her with donations to her foundation, then the White House just became an accessory to espionage. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call from Mo in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. I missed you last couple of days, and good to see you back on. Reality check. Just a quick question. I live here in South Florida. Got a nice place. I was thinking of having Ken O'Keefe come down here sometime in spent a few days. I've been following a long time, and the guy seems straight up. You know about him, and what's your opinion of him? That was kind of what I was asking.
Okay, let's see. Well, I've had Ken O'Keefe on the show a couple of times before, and I don't have contact information, though, but you can track him down on his website, okay?
Right. But I wanted your opinion of him and his message.
Well, I agree with much of what he says, obviously, and I'm sorry I'm distracted. I'm dealing with the hackers trying to wreck my site yet again. They always hit it just when I'm on the broadcast. What specifically is Ken O'Keefe saying that you have questions about?
I don't have any questions. I just think he agrees. He's kind of like same along lines you are with Israel. He seems to see the whole picture down to the core. Yes.
Yeah, we're definitely in agreement on that one.
He's kind of like a brother to you, as I think, but you're kind of hesitating, kind of making me wonder.
No. I was hesitating, and I explained that. Remember Hillary's $1 million goon squad? They always hit my server when I'm on the air because they know I'm not available to deal with it.
Well, I'll let you get back to work. So you rate him. You would let him come stay with you, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, not a question. Not a question.
So much,
all right.
Mike.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Yeah, Hillary's people, they do love to play dirty, and they think it's cool, and they want to, be part of the Führerists and the rest of that, and then they go home at night and abuse themselves to old James Bond movies. I'm a spy. Now then, this issue with Hillary's email server is not a new one. Hillary Clinton has had strange relations with email systems all along. And there's an article that came out in New York Post, no less, talking about how Hillary Clinton has been losing or vanishing emails going all the way back to when she was First Lady. And apparently, when Bill Clinton was in office, there was this secret project. They called it Project X because they thought it was cool. And basically in 1999, when investigators were looking into Whitewater, Travelgate, Filegate, the murder of Vince Foster, and all of these other scandals, they were sending over requests for all official communications related to these. And oh my goodness, more than 1 million of these subpoenaed emails were lost during a glitch in a West Wing computer server. We had all the emails. We were ready to comply with the subpoenas, but golly gee whiz, that gosh darn Microsoft Vista, and we lost all the emails, like they weren't keeping backups. And so they've been doing this all along, and they keep getting away with it. All right, let's go back to the phones here. John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? John?
Bearing in mind this weekend's memorial and its meaning, have you watched Hellstorm yet, that documentary?
No, I did not watch Hellstorm, and it's just been a bit of a zoo here between, getting Claire's new computer up and running and choir and all the rest of that stuff. I haven't got to it. It's down low on my list, and I'm sorry. I apologize.
Well, I've got another one for you. It's an interview by James Corbett of James Perloff.
Yes.
And it's called the interview about Lexington Green and the shot that echoed round the world. And it's very interesting, very informative. And this guy, James Perloff, he's got PhDs from 2 U.S. universities and one from Oxford University in the UK. So he's pretty smart, and he's done a lot of investigating and got letters and diaries from all the relatives and people that were of the people originally involved in that. And
involved in what? What specifically are we talking about?
Well, the shot that, the British troops and the militia, the Lexington Green massacre.
Yes.
It wasn't a massacre. Apparently, according to both the letters from the militias and from the British Army. A guy called Noble sorted out all these historical documents. And it appears that it was Samuel Adams and his roughnecks from the taverns of Boston who started the shooting. They shot 10 shots at the British soldiers. Only one shot hit one soldier. And then, of course, the Brits thought they were under fire.
Well, okay, hang on just a second here, because you seem to be confusing the battles of Lexington and Concord with the Boston Massacre. And
no. This is the Battle of Lexington Green, when the army was on the way to Concord to capture the arms and explosives that were supposedly stored there.
Well, yes. Well, it's known that Sam Adams was definitely the most militant of the early founding fathers. That's not really that much of a surprise. Anyway, listen, John, we got a bunch of calls piling in on here, and I need to get to them. So thank you very much, and we're going to let you go. And American history is fun, and I'm not disrespecting it, because on my mother's side of the family, that's our own history. Let's go to Chris in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, aloha again, Michael, and thanks for taking the call today.
What can I do for you?
Well, I thought I might remind people of a few things that are relative to your conversation. One, if we observe that this so-called Obamacare is really Hitlericare, it was then the fellow from Utah, it starts with an M, I can't think of his name, I apologize. But more importantly, there seems to be a profound bias of the courts in America, really creating an effectual obstruction of justice, denial of all due process and substantial justice.
Oh, there's no question about that. I mean, look,
people in the courts.
Look at the big stink they're having down there in Guantanamo, where the judge approved of the destruction of exculpatory evidence against Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, because the official story must stand, and we don't care what's truth and factual and accurate. We have a lie to preserve here at all costs. And we've seen so many examples where not even in politics, just movie stars who get away literally with murder as long as they're currently bankable. When they stop being bankable, then they'll pay the price for their crimes like anybody else. And again, out of the 30-some-odd years I worked inside the film industry, I got to see a lot of that stuff close up.
Well, you're exactly right, Michael, and I have been watching these courts for quite a long time, and I discovered that the edict from John Paul Roberts, the Chief Justice of the so-called Supreme Extreme Court, political activist in black robes, has given an edict to the judges to get down off their just, neutral, not conflicted benches and get into the game, as he terms it, and pitch or hit for whichever side serves the self-interest of the judge or their professional interest, particularly, or other fiduciary interest, which basically has been Katie boiled the door for bribery, trickery, fakery, and barratry to be practiced all around America. And I have seen evidence that I've observed myself in cases I have brought where they're actually running a neo-feudalistic star chamber system and denying all substantial justice and due process of law. Therefore, they are actually revolutionary terrorists masked as judges sitting in the district courts of the U.S.
Well, I think there's a really good example of that when we had Alan Favish on the show a while back here, where he literally went all the way to the United States Supreme Court to secure the release of crime scene photos of the body of Vincent Foster to substantiate reports and medical records that there was a second wound to Foster's neck, which was inconsistent with the claim of suicide. And the Supreme Court basically said that dead people have a right to privacy, and more importantly, the family of dead people have a right to privacy. And that's not what the privacy ruling and law was all about. When you die, you lose your legal right to privacy. That's it. And because there was nothing that was damaging to the family members in those photos, saying that it was a violation of the family privacy was absurd on the face of it. But the Supreme Court judges were there to protect the official story. Because remember, as I keep saying, there's two kinds of secrets in politics. There are the little secrets that are fodder for campaigns, like Anthony Weiner and his cell phone games, or Ted Cruz, and Bill Clinton down on Jeff Epstein's Orgy Island and the rest of it. But then there are the great secrets, the ones that would bring the entire government down, such as the fact that Vincent Foster was murdered inside the White House, John F. Kennedy's assassination, 9/11. I mean, the list is endless of huge dark secrets. Hillary Clinton possibly being a spy for foreign governments while serving as Secretary of State. That one would bring the whole government down. And it should. And by the way, I get a lot of emails from people who are saying, don't you realize the things you're talking about, if they're true, they could destroy the country? No, they can't. They can destroy the government, and that's not the same thing. And then they'll come back and say, yes, it's the same thing. The government is the country. I said, heck no. The Nazis are gone. Germany's doing just fine.
Well, the preposterosity and the
I love that word.
That's coming out of the Supreme Court is just insane. And I want to compliment you on your observations early on in the show, but I would point out that rather than a right, we have a duty to guard, protect, and defend our families and our country against all enemies, foreign or domestic, whether it's in your house or on the borders of America. God bless America. Remember the Republic. And thank you, Michael.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good day, Michael. Michael, I want you to know, I don't know, I want you and listening audience to understand what's going on here in South Florida. I don't know if you're familiar with these 22 Cubans got stuck on a buoy out there in the ocean there, and now they're trying to say they're going to get citizenship through wet foot, dry foot. And that happens. They're all going to be going, instead of going to dry land, they're all going to be aiming for the buoy. And Obama supposedly cut a deal with Raul Castro. Now we're supposed to have all these relations, and now we have thousands and thousands of Cubans trying to sneak into Florida because they want that free money. They hate that they don't really give a damn about this country as far as the laws or anything about this country. They just want to come here for the freebies. They get Section 8 housing. You're getting $17,000 per head. The land wet foot, dry foot. Let everybody know in this country how much money even Rubio's been talking about how much money these people are getting, and it's costing the taxpayers billions of dollars. Now, Michael,
Donald Trump is right. Donald Trump is right. These people are being given better treatment by the United States government than our veterans, our Social Security recipients, our own kids in school. The same thing is going on in Europe. These people are not fleeing wars. They're not fleeing political regimes. They're being bought and bribed to make these moves, to bring about this homogenization of the human population leading to the New World Order. Have you seen how always when they talk about a nationalistic fever in a country, it's a bad thing, it's a bad thing. We can't have nationalism, except in one country. Israel. Israel said, of course we're going to be nationalistic. We are the Jewish nation, and we're going to be nationalistic and keep our race pure, and the rest of you, we're just going to blur you all together here.
Well, you better believe it, Michael. And you know what? These are the Democrats. They're doing this, and they're literally trying to destroy the white males in this country, like I told you a couple shows back. And I'll tell you this, they had a thing on TV today they were talking about on the news, that the white males are like 32% of the population. Buchanan is writing a story about it, and they're literally trying to get us down to like 15%, just like they did South Florida. I want you to know another thing. Miami Beach used to be predominantly Jewish. There's not even 5% Jewish left on Miami Beach, and I don't know how these Jews are backing that, because, you know, I don't get where these Jewish Americans get this. Their liberalism. They vote 88% for Obama. They'll probably vote around 75% for Hillary. Maybe Trump will get a little more to Jewish vote this time around. But I can tell you right now, their leftist views and how they control the media is disgusting. And what they're allowing here to happen here to South Florida is absolutely absurd. And I can tell you, and then, all this immigration crap, now you got the Kate Steinle thing coming up. She was almost murdered, almost a year ago now? I think it's next month. She got shot by the illegal, deported 5 times.
Yes.
And let me ask you, how much money is the Steinle family entitled to by the government? I believe they should get hundreds of millions of dollars for a government that was being derelict in its duty to defend our cities with the sanctuary city crap, which is a disaster and it's pitiful. People who are doing the sanctuary city, Michael, they should be held for treason.
Okay.
They're
Tom?
treasonous traitors.
Tom?
Held to their face. I don't care if it's Obama.
Tom?
I don't care.
Tom, gotta calm down. Going to have a stroke. There was another ugly incident. There was another ugly incident over in Egypt, where apparently a group of Muslims killed somebody who they thought was in a relationship with a Christian. And the president of Egypt said, look, we must all be tolerant and not be upset. Well, tolerance is a two-way street. they're saying we should be tolerant of Muslim ways. Well, the other side of that is Muslims need to be tolerant of Christian ways or Jewish ways. You can't have tolerance in one direction only. That's a naturally destabilizing situation. It's going to lead to chaos when it's okay for these people to be living life the way they want to, but other people are being told you must adjust and adapt to this foreign way of life, or else you're being intolerant and you're a microaggressor and you're being racist. And again, going back to that door lock analogy, I have a lock on my door not because I hate my neighbors or I'm intolerant of my neighbors. Actually, I got pretty good neighbors, to be very honest about it. But I have that lock on my door because I love the people inside that locked door, meaning Claire. And that same thing applies to borders. We lock the borders not because we're being intolerant or racist or hating. We are locking the borders to protect what is inside our nation from those who would steal it, pillage it, hijack it, send it back home. That's basically what it is.
Again, Michael, what they're trying to do by design is get the white Anglo males down to around 20% so they can totally control this country. You're going to have Sharia law in Dearborn, Michigan. You have Sharia law, I think, all over Michigan pretty soon. There's a design by, I don't know whom they are.
Okay, Tom. Okay, I'm not going to take your phone calls anymore unless you present an idea and we have an open debate, rather than just, rambling on here. Now, I don't know that we're going to be living under Sharia law. We're starting to hear mumblings from Pope Francis about synthesizing a new global world religion from components of all the disparate religions, which actually would make sense when you realize that Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all share a common historical origin. Okay? So, all of this
Michael,
is... Okay. We have to let you go. Take a commercial break. We have to take a commercial break. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And even Fox News is out there saying this has really reached a breaking point with regard to Hillary and her email. They're quoting USA Today, saying Hillary Clinton broke the rules. Now, here's the question we, the people, need to be asking. Do we reward politicians who break the rules with the nation's ultimate prize, the White House? And the answer has to be no, of course not. It sets a bad precedent. We're supposed to prevent people who break the rules from ever getting their hands on that nuclear arsenal or the pen in the checkbook. We want presidents who enforce the laws and comply with the laws, not who think the laws and are to be ignored and the Constitution is just a blankety-blank piece of paper. Now, Judge Napolitano is out there commenting on the fact that Hillary Clinton's staffer, Brian Pagliani, who set up that server, by the way, that was a political appointee. He's not really considered a really good IT expert. But he basically refurbished the server that was in their home that dates back to Bill Clinton's presidency. Then it was turned over to that company in Denver, who had it parked inside their restroom. I mean, really nonsense. And by the way, Bill Clinton, when president, signed an executive order that any computer companies employed by the U.S. government that might be handling sensitive data had to be vetted by the intelligence agencies. Hillary Clinton violated her own husband's executive order. Well, a couple of weeks ago, when the investigators were looking into what Brian Pagliani had been doing, the State Department came out and said, all of his emails are gone. We have no idea what happened. Golly gee shuckies, but all of Brian Pagliani's emails are gone. Now, if you know anything about how email systems store their mails, they are not stored by name. If you look at any email system such as, Outlook is a good example, very commonly used. The data is handled in what is called a sparse array of individual nodes, and each node represents an email, and there are little subfields to, from, and the rest of it. Makes it easy to search, but it's not sitting in a single lump that can be deleted. Somebody literally went on through and searched out and deleted all of these emails, and it's that flashing red sign, cover up, cover up, cover up. And if the government's not going to come clean on what was going on with Hillary and her email server, then we are just free to allow our imaginations to run wild and assume the worst. Hillary Clinton possibly selling U.S. secrets to other countries, including our enemies, and being paid through her charitable foundation. What a scandal for the ages that would be. A serving Secretary of State betraying the country to other nations. There's no reason to say that it couldn't possibly happen when you look at the history of the Clintons and the 1996 Chinagate scandal. They did it before. We got to take a short break for our top of the hour station ID. We'll be back with hour number 2. We got a lot of stuff to get through today, so we're going to be rushing. Talk to you when we come back from the other side. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I was just checking on the weather here. It is unusually cold, rainy, and wet. Claire and I have to go out in that a little bit later on today. All right, getting on back to the news. So, as you know, the Obama administration has mounted a legal challenge trying to get the judge in the lawsuit filed by Judicial Watch to block the deposition of Hillary Clinton. And this is going to come back to bite them because remember, there was a comment Obama himself made a while back. The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide. And that's exactly what's going on. Now, another of Hillary Clinton's minions, former Chief of Staff Cheryl Mills, is asking the judge to order Judicial Watch not to release any audio or video recordings of her deposition, which is scheduled at the end of this week. Cover up, cover up, cover up, cover up. Well, if you're not going to tell us what's going on, we're just going to imagine the worst. That's what we're going to do. Whatever you think Hillary Clinton was doing there with her private email server, sending out ransomware, porn, whatever, just assume the worst. And I think the worst possible crime that Hillary Clinton may have committed was a repeat of the Chinagate scandal. Selling U.S. secrets to foreign governments through that weak email server and collecting the payments through her charitable foundation. That's what I think was going on. Remember, Guccifer, the hacker, when he was talking about when he was inside Hillary's email server, which is apparently very easy to get into, he saw at least 10 foreign IP addresses logged in at the same time. Now, Forbes has come out with an article which may be telling us where this is going. How the State Department IG's report on Hillary Clinton's email server could actually result in Joe Biden becoming the Democratic nominee. And they're pointing out how lesser government officials have faced far more serious charges for far less offenses than what Hillary is dealing with. And they're saying all the indications are that the FBI investigation is going to run around in circles, put on a really good show of having an investigation, and come on out and say, well, it was all a bunch of mistakes, it was unintentional, it was careless, she didn't mean to do wrong. Now, if you're not paying attention and you run through a red light and you kill a pedestrian on a crosswalk, you didn't mean to do that, obviously. But you are still going to jail, aren't you? The same thing applies here. And Title 18 does not allow you to get off the hook for unintentional mishandling of classified documents. It's right in there in Title 18. If you do it, you don't have to intend harm. If you do it by accident and neglect, you are still in serious, serious trouble. Now, this leads us to a growing concern among the Democratic Party leadership, Debbie Wasserman Schultz not included, obviously. Democratic leaders are now becoming very worried about the Democratic brand. They're looking back at what happened to the Republican Party when Richard Nixon came crashing down. And the general feeling among the population is, well, the GOP, they're party of the corrupt, they're all crooked as heck. And it took the Republican Party decades to recover from the stain of Richard Nixon. And now they're looking at the same thing possibly happening to them with Hillary Clinton. Because the whole nation is seeing the Democratic Party leadership backing a dishonest candidate. And so there are a lot of Democratic leaders who are saying it might be time to get rid of Hillary, because at this stage, she's going to lose to Donald Trump anyway, and all they can do is damage the Democratic brand by continuing to push Queen Hillary forward. Article coming out of the governmentslaves.info. Thousands are calling on the Democratic National Committee to get rid of corporatist tool Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And we know that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, since the beginning, has made it very clear she is going to force the Democratic voters to accept Hillary Clinton as the nominee. They're not interested in any other options. You will not be allowed a choice. You will love your Queen Hillary. All shall love her and despair. The conventional wisdom. Now, Schultz herself is in a little bit of hot water, because CBS Miami is reporting there's a bill going through Congress to rein in the payday lenders, which is little more than legalized loan sharking. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz is going on in to try and put a delay on the bill of 2 years to allow these predatory lenders to take advantage of America's economic hardship for another 2 years, with interest rates of over 300%. And so people are looking at Debbie Wasserman Schultz and saying, yeah, she's a tool of the money junkies. And she is absolutely oblivious to the pain and suffering of ordinary Americans. And here's where it gets really, really interesting. Because of the rise of Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton has been dipping into her coffers. They had so much money allocated for the primaries, and then they had a budget set aside for the general election and another budget for the convention. Well, they've already gone through all the primary money. They're dipping into the money for the general election campaign, and they're starting to run short on that. They've actually dipped into the budget for the convention. They're running out of money. And all the people who've been signing all those huge checks to Hillary are starting to scratch their heads and saying, if Judicial Watch hits pay dirt or the FBI goes public, then we've basically wasted all the money we've given her so far. Why should we give her any more at this point? So the faucets are drying up for Hillary in terms of fundraising here. By the way, remember Michelle Fields, the professional victim? She's been out there screaming, he sexually harassed me, he assaulted me, he did that, and tried that botched case against Donald Trump's campaign manager, which went nowhere when a video from a different angle surfaced and showed she was just making it up. Well, you don't need to feel bad about her having lost her job. She's got a new one. She is now working for Hillary's campaign. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Not much, Michael. Thanks for having me. The Democratic National, the party, the DNC, would love to have Biden in replacement of Hillary Clinton.
So would I.
I think that's why their press continues to tell Bernie Sanders you should drop out of the race, because they don't want him. He's the guy that will be for us. And they want nothing to do with interference between corporatism and the people.
Well, it really doesn't matter at this point, barring the unexpected, like somebody with a gun in a hotel pantry. I'm seeing Donald Trump as the next president of this country. But we know that Hillary Clinton, over the years, people who get in her way have a strange habit of getting dead. So if Bernie Sanders were the nominee, he's going to lose to Trump. If Biden comes on in this late in the game, I think it's going to alienate a lot of Democratic voters as well. Trump is still going to come out ahead. And personally, I am not resting until Hillary Clinton is out of the race. I mean, that...
Michael, I hate to disagree with you. I think that Bernie Sanders would beat Trump by 10 points. And I think the statistics show that. Everybody wants Medicare. Everyone wants our
Okay,
kids
well,
to
great
be
if
able
Bernie
to-
Sanders wins. Great if Bernie Sanders wins. You know, I mean,
that-
my attitude this campaign is anybody but Hillary for the White House, and let's get those Israel firsters and war hawks out of Congress. That's my political philosophy. Like I said, if it comes down to November and the presidential race is Hillary Clinton and Godzilla, the lizard is going to get my vote.
You got that right. Hey, you know, I did read, I forget where, that Hillary Clinton is actually a crypto Jew.
Well, who really? If that's true, Hillary's going to give Jews a bad name.
That's right. And I know that there are some very good Jews. Like I think Bernie Sanders is a good Jew.
Yeah.
I think it's the elites that are really some of the elites.
Well, that's how they get to be elites, unfortunately. And it's like I said when I worked in Hollywood, a lot of Jewish people there, and some were real sharks, like David Begelman and so forth. And then others were just absolute gems, like Renee Valente, who I loved dearly. And now that she's passed on, I can talk about it because I didn't dare mention that I knew her out of fear of the consequences she would suffer for it. But she was a treasure. She was my Hollywood mom, and we just stayed close through the years. And I absolutely loved her.
That's right. Hey, Michael, I thank you for your show. Keep up the good work, and let's get Bernie Sanders in there. Okay, bye.
Well, like I said, anybody but Hillary. Anybody but Hillary. Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, God's Cthulhu. I would vote for Cthulhu over Hillary Clinton at this point. All righty, getting on back to the news. Hillary is now dealing with an Obamacare problem. And that earlier caller was right. Hillary sees this as the vindication of her own failed Hillary Care program, which collapsed spectacularly during Bill Clinton's term in office, and now it's back as Obamacare, but Hillary really sees it as Hillary Care with a package, a new wrapper all over it. And so she's out there still pushing for Obamacare, and that is a liability because we are already getting word as Hillary Clinton goes out and campaigns on the basis of keeping Obamacare going that those Obamacare insurance premiums are going up like a rocket, not including North Korea's botched test. And that is something Americans don't respond to, but she's trapped. She can't back off it. And another problem that Hillary Clinton is dealing with is the growing public awareness that the vast majority of the money she has had to spend running for office has come from the big money junkie donors along Wall Street. And people are starting to realize that's what's gone wrong in U.S. politics. When the limitations on campaign donations were stripped away, the government basically put a giant for sale sign out in front of the Capitol building and the White House, and they've been acting like it ever since. And we want the big money out of politics. We want politics to return to being a reflection of what the American people think is best for the nation. That's what we want. Now, last week, very late, there was a video of Bernie Sanders coming onto a convention, and in the background was the music of DMX's Where the Hood At, which angered a lot of people. Only it turned out the video is a fake. There was no music actually playing when Bernie Sanders took the stage. That was added in. Now, who would do a dirty trick like that? I just wonder. Meanwhile, Ted Cruz is beginning to realize that he has become sort of the Canadian version of kryptonite because he's going around to various members of the Senate and saying, would you like me to come on and help you with your re-election campaign? And they're all saying, no, don't show up. I'm washing my hair that night. I'm rotating my tires. I'm aerating my lawn and cleaning my oven and the rest of it. Nobody wants him on that stage. We're looking at a story that just came out of Investment Watch blog where more and more Senate leaders are starting to sign on to Donald Trump and saying, this is the guy the people want. We can either ride with it to victory or we can destroy ourselves trying to get in his way. So Ted Cruz' possibility of a surprise at the convention is rapidly fading away, as well it should. Remember what they were saying about Hillary Clinton isn't following the rules? Neither was Ted Cruz. He is constitutionally ineligible to serve as president or vice president. Now, if you don't think it's a fair rule in this age of global travel, and I could see that there's an argument for that, because of a lot of Americans, especially among our military, they're American citizens deployed to another country, and they have a kid there, and then they come on back, and the kid is ineligible for the White House. I can see merit in that argument, but there is a correct way to deal with that, and it's called a constitutional amendment. You don't just get to stand up there and say, well, the rule isn't fair to me, I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist. Because that undermines the whole idea of the rule. Getting into the war zone, there's apparently a major battle going on outside Fallujah. It's already being described as a human catastrophe. And there's a lot of criticism coming on down. And this appears to be a conflict in which the U.S. military wasn't able to assume their normal position of standing between the Iraq army and ISIS. And needless to say, ISIS is getting clobbered. So Iraq is beginning to realize the double game that the U.S. has been playing in their country, just as Assad has. Speaking of Assad, there are now reports Turkish military forces have crossed the border into Syria and have established positions near the town of Azaz and Afrin. If these reports are true, Turkey has essentially started an undeclared war on Bashar al-Assad. Now, do you remember that Syrian Human Rights Observatory? It's actually based in Great Britain. It's one guy in a house. He hasn't been in Syria in something like 12 years. But he gets all this media attention, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. And they came out with a story recently saying that Russian air forces had conducted airstrikes in Idlib, and they had photos to prove it. Bad Russians, the Russians must go from Syria. Turns out the photos are 6 months old. They aren't current. This is simply another piece of propaganda by another manufactured front operation. Can't even call it a group. It's one guy. And they give him money and a supply, and they give him a fancy name, and they give him media attention, and all of a sudden, this is the authoritative voice for human rights violations in Syria. No, it isn't. It's another PR front. Now, NATO is convening a summit that will raise the military presence in Poland and the region. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is saying that this will enhance the alliance's defensive and deterrent presence in Poland and the region. Here's your rifle, Jens. And here's where it gets really interesting. The Polish foreign minister has now publicly admitted the missile shield in Poland is directed at Russia. The U.S. has been sending these missiles all over Europe, and always, it's to stop Iran from launching a nuclear missile at Europe. And Russia kept saying, why are they all along our borders? Well, don't you want us to defend you from an Iranian nuclear missile? And Russia's response was, actually, we're pretty well set up to do that for ourselves. And now the Polish foreign minister is out there saying, this is all about encircling Russia. They really do want to start a new world war because they can't think of anything better to do to get out of this mess they've made of the economy. Ordinary people are not happy about this. Greek protesters are burning the NATO and EU flags at a Crete military base. Everybody in Europe understands if there is a new world war involving Russia, it's going to be fought on their front lawns. They've already been through that twice. They really do not want to have a third time. And even though the EU leadership and NATO are all gung-ho about this, we are seeing in town level, county level, city governments, and ordinary people, they've had enough. They don't want any more of this. Now let's talk about that North Korean test. And it was a test, but it did generate some rather interesting headlines. Press TV literally came on out with a headline, Japan Army on alert over possible North Korea missile attack. And I'm not sure where they got that idea of using that word because it was a test firing. And remember what I said, to find out if you're being lied to, look for what should be there and isn't. And what isn't there is a reason for North Korea to launch a missile at Japan right now. More about this when we come back from these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about this North Korean missile test. And that's all it was. But somebody was trying to put out the story that this was potentially an attack without coming up with any reason for North Korea to do something that dumb. And so the concern was that a U.S. submarine with a vertical launch system cruising just off the North Korea coast could launch a missile towards Japan to get the hot phase of World War III going. Well, everybody was basically flapping their gums and wasting their time because the North Korean missile test exploded shortly after takeoff, apparently close enough to the ground to injure some of the people on the ground. It's the fourth failed attempt this year. So this idea of trying to portray North Korea as some kind of a threat to world peace, not really. Now, I've looked at some of those North Korean missile designs. They're aesthetically very pleasing. They're very long and very slender. But it does pose some engineering problems. You have to keep the shape rigid. If there's any flexing, it's going to go off course. And that makes it effectively very brittle, which means if there is a major torsional stress, it's going to shatter. And I think that's a design flaw they're not going to be able to get away from. They're going to have to go back and come up with missiles that are a little bit wider and a little bit shorter, regardless of how they look. Or maybe there could be another explanation completely. Kim Jong-un could just be firing off large fireworks rockets with a paint job saying, North Korea, machine of death coming your way. And they go up and they go bang, and he says, major look, major look, major look. Russia's having a little bit better success. They just flight tested an anti-satellite missile capable of destroying U.S. satellites. We know the U.S. has been deploying similar systems, and I cannot stress that allowing there to be war in low Earth orbit would be an absolute disaster for commercial space travel, communication satellites, whatever. Because when you're down here on the ground, the bottom of the gravity well, and you have an airplane going along and it explodes, the debris basically falls to the ground, and that's it. That's the end of it. But if something explodes in orbit, some of the debris will re-enter the atmosphere and burn up. Much of it is simply going to go into new orbits. And it's going to be small debris, stuff that cannot be tracked from the ground. And we've already had instances where not only the space shuttle, but the space station has been struck by unexpected microscopic debris, causing large amounts of damage. It's a real risk. So you take a satellite and you destroy it, and the shrapnel spreads on out, and it starts hitting other satellites and destroying them. And that's more shrapnel spreading on out. And it's literally a chain reaction that would turn low Earth orbit space around Earth into a minefield through which nobody could get a satellite. Whether it's military, communications, MTV. They can't even clean up the garbage that's already up there, let alone demining an entire, sphere the size of the planet Earth plus 100 some odd miles diameter increase. They're not going to be able to do it. I have a theory about how some of this stuff could be done on a small scale, but cleaning out all of low Earth orbit, we would just have to sit imprisoned on our own planet for 100 years, waiting for this stuff to all fall out of the sky and allow us to have safe space flight yet again. I'm really opposed to this space-based weaponry, whether it's American or Russian. It is like anything connected with war. It's horribly short-sighted. They stop thinking at victory or defeat, and hey, whatever we leave behind is future generations' problems to worry about, whether it's debris in low Earth orbit, depleted uranium, the barrels of chemical and weapons we have literally sunk into the ocean off the coast of Oahu. That's the way war people think. Oh, the war's over. Let's just dump all this stuff. Other people will worry about it down the road. Well, we're worried, and we can't do a thing about it. And the same thing is going to apply to filling low Earth orbit with shattered remnants of our space technology. I'm going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I want to point you all back and remind you about the book 1984 by George Orwell, which he wrote as a warning about the reemergence of dictatorship. Now, Orwell wrote this aftermath of World War II and how close we came to Hitler conquering the entire world. But Orwell saw the potential for that to move forward and grow, especially with new technology. And so he wrote the book as a warning, not as an instruction manual, which sadly it seems to be more and more. But a central tenet of that book, and others that followed, was that the enemy of the nation was a complete fiction. In Orwell's society, the big enemy was Emmanuel Goldstein. And they would show his face on the view screens for the 2-minute hate, where for 2 minutes you just yell and scream and spit your venom at Emmanuel Goldstein's image to get all the frustrations and rage that you felt from the society out and direct it in a direction that the government wanted it to go. And Emmanuel Goldstein was afraid. They just made him up. And it turns out that this is modeled on a lot of real life, where tyrants will create an enemy or amplify one to seize more power. And I think one of the earliest examples would be Marcus Licinius Crassus in ancient Rome. And he was Rome's richest citizen, may have just been the richest man in the world. And he got rich by being very aggressive. In fact, his lust for gold was so well known, when he was finally killed by his enemies, they poured molten gold down his throat. Sort of celebration of his greed. Marcus Licinius Crassus, amazingly enough, invented the modern fire department. Although in Crassus' way, the way it worked was he had slave teams and wagons with firefighting gear set up strategically all the way through Rome. When a building caught fire, his slaves and wagon would rush to the scene, and they would offer to buy the building for about half its value. And if the owner would sell, they'd put the fire out. And if the owner refused to sell, they'd let it burn to the ground. And by this very simple device, and the fact that Rome had a lot of fires, up to the one that, in Nero's time, Crassus eventually became the largest single landholder in Rome, second only to the emperor himself. That's the kind of man he was. So, Crassus had political ambitions, but Rome was still a republic. They didn't have central tyrannical leaders. And so it was Crassus who exploited the slave revolt of Spartacus. Now, Spartacus and the gladiators wanted to get out of Italy. And yes, they were looting and pillaging as they went along, but they wanted to get out. They just wanted to go. And that wasn't good enough for Crassus. And so Crassus, by very cleverly positioning legions, forced Spartacus to turn back to Rome, and then said, Spartacus is coming, I need extraordinary authorities to deal with him. And he was elected, or rather declared, first consul. And that was the very first step in the transition from Rome as a republic to the Rome of the emperors. And we all saw how that kind of worked out. So this is an old trick. And now we're having all these people who are coming on out and saying that Al-Qaeda never existed. It was a made-up enemy by the U.S. government to scare you into compliance with their agenda. Now, I was suspicious right from the very beginning, because Al-Qaeda in Arabic translates as the base, like the base of a pillar, or possibly the database at Langley, where they had all the contact information for the Mujahideen fighters. But in Arabic slang, Al-Qaeda means a toilet. And if you're creating a fearsome group of terrorists to lay the world into shaking, quaking, cowering fear, you don't call yourself the toilet. Hi, we are here from the toilet. We're going to blow up your building. And everybody starts sniggering. You need to get Jeff Dunham over here with Ahmed the dead terrorist. Silence, I kill you. That's why they had to rebrand with ISIS. And that's why I was suspicious from the very beginning. Because Al-Qaeda, as the name of the terrorist group, was thought up by somebody who didn't know Arabic slang. He knew the Arabic language, or she did, didn't know Arabic slang. Dead giveaway. So we had, like Dr. Michael Chossudovsky, came on out saying we are dealing with a criminal undertaking at a global level. The global war on terrorism is fake. It's based on fake premises. It tells us that somehow America and the Western world are going after a fictitious enemy, the Islamic State, when in fact the Islamic State is fully supported and financed by the Western military alliance and America's allies in the Persian Gulf. They say Muslims are terrorists. They're not the product of Muslim society, and that should be abundantly clear. The global war on terror is a fabrication, a big lie, and a crime against humanity. Robin Cook, the former British secretary, came on out and said, the truth is there is no Islamic army or terrorist group called Al-Qaeda. And any informed intelligence officer knows this. But there's a propaganda campaign to make the public believe in the presence of an intensified entity representing the devil, only in order to drive TV watchers to accept a unified international leadership for a war against terrorism. Michael Schur, being interviewed on Russia Today, former CIA intelligence officer, 20-year career, came on out and said Washington's enemy is an enemy that doesn't exist. It didn't exist when bin Laden was alive. It doesn't exist now. It's a fake. Bin Laden himself was a CIA asset. His code name was Tim Osman. And prior to his showing up in Afghanistan in robes and machine guns, there are photos of him, as a kid. He's wearing cable neck sweaters. He's driving, hot sports cars. He's hanging out with the chicks. And remember, the bin Laden family is very tightly tied in with the U.S. government. Salim bin Laden, Osama's older brother, was business partners with George Walker Bush in an energy company called Arbusto Energy that went bust. And Salim bin Laden died in a very suspicious plane accident shortly thereafter. The bin Laden construction company has made literally billions of dollars off the U.S. building and maintaining military bases all through the Middle East, and they're still a top contractor. Even though supposedly the son of the bin Laden house was the world's greatest terrorist. It's all a hoax. It's all a complete hoax. We call him Osama bin Goldstein, in that nod to George Orwell. Now, Tony Blair is out there. As you know, the Chilcot inquiry report is about to come out. They're trying to delay it until after the Brexit vote. That's very much up in the air. Tony Blair is out there taking the high ground. I will reject the Chilcot inquiry findings, and I look forward to a debate. Could almost imagine seeing Charlie Manson sitting in his jail cell saying, I reject the court's verdict, and I look forward to presenting my point of view. As it turns out, Tony need not worry. He is not going to be investigated in the Iraq War inquiry. He's been declared off limits, as it were. There'll be no charges about any of that. That does not get Tony Blair completely off the hook. He may not face a war crimes trial, although he richly deserves to do so, along with everybody else who sent us off to war on the basis of lies, fraud, and deceptions. But the Chilcot inquiry, giving him a get-out-of-war crimes jail free card, doesn't protect him from civil litigation. It's the same situation Hillary is facing here. Yes, Obama can block the FBI and the Department of Justice. They can't stop the civil courts and judicial watch, although they're starting to try and figure out a way to do just that. But Tony Blair, if this report comes on out and says that he misled the nation, the families of everybody who was killed in that war can file a civil lawsuit against him and make him poor. And by the way, if you're wondering what is the worst punishment you can do to a money junkie, it's not death. It's not even torture. It's make them poor. Take it all away. That's why Hillary was so terrified of Larry Klayman's RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation. Had it gone forward and been found guilty under the RICO statutes, all of the Clinton money could be confiscated by the U.S. government, which they'd spend it all on bad purposes again. But if you want to know the best way to punish a money junkie, it's take their money away from them. After that, they won't even want to live. Remember the French Revolution? They took all the nobility, they took away their wealth, and then they were so bored with life, they went up to that guillotine just smiling and showing how brave they were, because life wasn't worth living anymore if they weren't stealing other people's wealth. Now, down in Israel, things are getting very interesting. Israel's government has taken a hard shift to the right, slightly to the right of Attila the Hun. Interestingly enough, 200 former top Israeli military and security officials have issued a policy paper saying it is time to make peace with the Palestinians, and basically saying they don't want to go to this hard right-wing approach of kill them all, let God sort them out, that seems to be coming out of Netanyahu and his cabal, as it were. And the strain is already starting to show. I mean, there could be a military coup. But according to this story in antiwar.com, the far-right government may be near collapse. It's already starting to strain. Nobody wants to back it. Nobody wants to be part of it. Now, turning to the economies around the world, the G7 has agreed to extend the sanctions against Russia, even though the people living in all those G7 countries are suffering hardship. The G7's attitude is, yes, we know you're losing your farms and you're losing your businesses, and all that you've worked for your entire life is just dissolving away before your very eyes, and it's a horrible tragedy, but it's a sacrifice we are willing to make. Jim Willey is warning that the Chinese are preparing to issue a gold-backed trade currency, and that will be a hammer blow on the U.S. dollar as a global trade and banking currency, because it's not based on anything except future slave labor of the American people, of which there aren't enough of us to make good on all those treasury bonds. A gold-backed trading currency is instantly going to be the favored trading currency around the world. And I'm sure the U.S. government's going to be calling up those countries and saying, if you use that gold-backed Chinese trade currency, bad things are going to happen to you. We're going to send our button men over there in their nice uniforms and their guns, and we're going to make sure that you don't stray off the reservation here. Because that's how we do business in Washington, D.C. You do what we tell you to do, or bad things happen. That's how our government operates here. And having learned nothing in 2008, because the damages were all dropped onto ordinary American citizens and not on the Wall Street banks, Wells Fargo is going back to trying to lure low-income, debt-heavy millennial families into mortgages. And everybody's saying, this is reckless. What are you doing? And Wells Fargo is out there saying, we are desperate to find new and innovative ways to boost lending. Well, you know something? I've got a new and innovative way to boost lending. Bring back the high-paying jobs so that people will know they can pay back what they borrow. There's a new and innovative idea. I can't believe I'm the first person to think about it. And of course I'm not. I'm being facetious. But we're seeing this same trend throughout all of these banks. We want to loan more. We need to enslave more people to debt. How are they going to pay it back? That's not my problem. The Deutsche Bank derivatives are ready for failure. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog. The European biggest domino is about to go down, and it will be ugly. The banking crisis in Spain has returned. They thought they were out of that, but the shares of Banco Popular just got crushed. Like I said, you could look at the European Union as a large wooden boat, and there are 22 holes drilled in the bottom, and they've got 21 corks. All the corks are in a hole, but water is still coming in. And so the EU will grab a cork out of another hole, pound it into the leaking hole in full view of the press camera, saying, we're solving the problem. But the water is still coming in, and the European Union is sinking, and they cannot stop it. Because that private central bank is the reason there are more holes than corks. And that is not going to change. What they're trying to do is move the debt around, to try and keep things looking good. But it's going to reach a point where every single nation in the European Union has a debt that's right at that default point. And when one goes, they're all going to go. All at the same time. Look at Venezuela. What's going on down there? I'm going to make a prediction here. That sometime in the next 2 months, we're going to hear stories of cannibalism going on down in Venezuela. And everybody's out there saying, bad Maduro, bad Maduro. No. Venezuela is a victim of U.S. economic war. They've been trying to get a new government in Venezuela that would sell Venezuela's oil only for the U.S. dollar. They got very angry when Venezuela wanted their gold back. Now they've starved Venezuela to the point where Venezuela's having to sell the gold. See, we told you we were going to keep it. It's ours now. Alan Greenspan is out there warning Venezuelan-style martial law is coming to the United States of America because we're on that same private central bank created path to destruction. I know I like Donald Trump, but boy, I do wish we had a new Andrew Jackson running in this campaign. Somebody who would stand up there and say it's time for the private central banks to go down. Ron Paul was doing that. That's why they worked so hard to get him out of the race. Because in this country, money and banks are much more important than human beings. And I think it's time for that philosophy to change. We need to get to a government and a political system that says human beings at the top of all. Then economy underneath that, war underneath that, favors for other countries way down in the sub-basement. That's what we need. We need a realignment of our properties to put human beings, the American people, back up on top on the list of priorities. That's what we need. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, anti-austerity protests are sweeping across Italy and Spain, along with the others we're seeing in places like France, Germany, Great Britain. And at the way things are going, this push for a global government has created a climate that could lead to a global revolution. And I had an idea, and I may start a GoFundMe site on this to start a company. I've got an updated design on the guillotine. And it's basically a very long one with 20 holes. No waiting. I think it's time that somebody starts manufacturing. I think we're going to need those before this is all over here. Now, the Spanish are calling their anti-austerity protests the March of Dignity. And that's a big part of it. When people work hard and they enjoy the rewards of their labor, that's a big part of their sense of self-image and their dignity. When their wealth is taken away from them by government and bankers without their permission, that's not just an attack on their money, it's an attack on their sense of self-worth. And anybody who doesn't understand that is going to misread the reaction of the people. Because your wealth, your home, your property is part of your identity. It's not like you're just going into somebody's store and saying, well, we're going to take a couple of cartons of eggs or anything like this. People are emotionally bonded to their work product, their accomplishment. And if you just take it away, they're going to emotionally react to it like a personal insult. Meanwhile, of course, we're getting the counter-arguments from the money junkies out there. Don't you understand? The rich cannot feel they're rich, no matter how much they have, unless they can look out their palace windows and see all of you living in total poverty. That's why we have to do this, so that they can feel good about their money. If everybody had a comfortable lifestyle, they wouldn't feel special. Seems to be the attitude out there. The French Prime Minister, Valls, is literally betting his entire political career on forcing through French austerity over all the protests that are taking place all over the place in France, everywhere. He's literally betting his career on it. Because after all, his masters, the bankers, have told him that people must be poorer so the bankers can have more. And by golly, that's what he's going to do. You know, I feel like it's time to go down to the library and read Tale of Two Cities again. We seem to be getting into that whole idea. Meanwhile, over at Zurich Insurance, the former CEO has just committed suicide, we are told, less than 3 years after its chief financial officer committed suicide, we are told. Apparently there's so much fraud that's been going on inside the money junkie palaces, it's taking a lot of wet work to clean it all up. Meanwhile, the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, has created... I'll save this until after the station break. You're going to love this one. You will love this one. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And so we're talking about the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella. And apparently last Thursday was speaking to an audience of tech industry women and telling them that they should stop asking for raises. They will get them when they deserve them. And not too surprisingly, there was a Twitter firestorm immediately afterwards saying it's very obvious that Microsoft doesn't give raises to anybody unless they're screaming for it. And the issue is that apparently the numbers at Microsoft are showing that men do get paid a little more than women for the same work. Now, it's a complex issue, because this idea of equal pay for equal work does not exist in a vacuum. As an idea, it's a good one. People who do equal work should get equal pay. But for the CEO to come on out and say, just trust us, this from the company that gave us Vista and Windows 10? I don't think so. Now, there was this strip club up in Michigan. And they got their 15 minutes of fame by putting on the little marquee out in front of their club, now hiring the class of 2016. Meaning they're after the women who are just now coming out of college or possibly even high school. And to come on in and, take their clothes off and dance and make a lot of money. And they can make a lot of money. And, of course, immediately the community, how dare you, this is terrible. And it struck me as kind of weird because the conventional wisdom seems to be that these young girls shouldn't get rich taking off their clothes. They should want to go to college and graduate with $100,000 in student loan debt and no job to pay it off, which is the current reality in this country. And let's be honest here. Assuming you don't get hooked on drugs or you've got some other situation where the money is going someplace else, it is a very high-paying job. On that video we made for Claire's song about joblessness, I'm forgetting the name of it that very last scene is of a lady at a strip pole, and that actually is a woman who got a law degree, was licensed to practice law, and discovered she made more money dancing in the nightclub than she did as a lawyer, and so she quit her law practice. When I was in college, I had a friend, and first name was Denise, I'm not going to mention the last name, and when we went our separate ways after college, I reconnected with her years later. She had actually won the Gong Show by doing a striptease out of a straitjacket. Very clever idea. And a mutual friend who had known of my Gong Show appearance hooked us together. And I said, oh, Denise, I knew you from Cal State. And it turned out she'd gone into the adult business right out of college, and she owned 3 strip malls and 2 apartment buildings. She was doing a heck of a lot better than I was. That is the reality that's out there. And I really have to take issue with all of these self-described moral crusaders who are saying it is better for women to go into $100,000 in student loan debt that they're never going to be able to pay off because it satisfies some arbitrary moral standard. There are some harsh realities in this country that we need to deal with. I would love to live in an economy where young women didn't have to look at these options. But that's just not real anymore. And so I have absolutely no condemnation for women who chose to go in that direction, as long as they hit on the downbeat, on the downbeat, on the downbeat. Now then, coming up on the Brexit vote, there was mention that information about the planned European Union army was going to be delayed until after the Brexit. Well, that didn't last too long, because the plans for the EU Army Command Center have been leaked ahead of the Brexit vote. And a lot of people are very alarmed, because the European Union is going through a transition similar to what we had in the United States of America. When the United States of America was started up, the states had their own armies, the National Guard. The central federal government was prohibited from having its own standing army, which would be a threat to the independence and prosperity of the separate states. And then over time, through Civil War and World War, the situation was reversed. The U.S. government has one of the mightiest armies on earth, nuclear armed, and the National Guard in the states has been federalized. The governor of the state has to literally ask the federal government for permission to use his own state's National Guard. And now the EU is going through that. All the member nations of the EU have their own armies. There's the French army, the German army, the British army, the Italian army. And now we're seeing that step. A grand unified army of the Republic. Or the Union, or whatever they're going to call themselves. And once they set that up, there will be efforts from Brussels to whittle away at the armies of the separate sovereign member nations, to bring them into obedience. Now, the fear-mongering campaign down in Britain is just ramping up to extremely ridiculous lengths. I love that comment that came out last week. Brexit will drive interest rates up or down. Yeah, I think so. Thanks for clarifying that for us. Boris Johnson is out there slamming unfair and damaging European Union rules on the value-added tax, and saying that a Brexit will free British from that value-added tax, and that means cheaper energy bills for the poor. Polls are showing a major shift towards leave. And the British pound sterling took a bit of a hit on that. And there's a new factor in that argument. This is coming out of VernonColeman.com. There is a question afoot where constitutional legal experts are saying that the manner in which Britain was brought into the European Union was actually a violation of British law and is automatically invalid. That Britain's membership in the EU is null and void from the beginning. Now, unfortunately, that didn't help us here in Hawaii. The U.S. government admits they grabbed Hawaii illegally in violation of treaty, and they feel really bad about it. They're so sorry about it. But they're not going to give it back, of course. Now, there is so much hinging on the Brexit. The TTIP is hinging on the Brexit. A successful Brexit is likely to trigger referendums for separation in many, many other countries. And so we know that whatever dirty trick, vote fraud, what have you, is going to be applied during that British Brexit referendum late next month. The government of Great Britain may actually ignore the results of the referendum. There was another country in Europe did exactly that. They had a referendum, the people voted one way, and the government said, well, thanks for your input, but we're going to do this other thing. And I think that, too, could spark civil unrest. We're seeing it all over Europe. It's a tinderbox. It's all these people who realize their governments are not working for their best interests. Their governments are in the process of selling them out to the New World Order. Now, apparently the Brexit postal ballot has been put on out there. It's kind of like a voting guide. It's not the real ballot. It's a practice ballot. Unfortunately, the one put out actually indicates a vote for the stay campaign in the Brexit. which means people who are just going on down the sample ballot guide are going to vote to stay in the European Union. It's outright fraud. Any dirty trick they can come up with, they're going to do. They are going to do. Now, remember back when Scotland was trying to get their referendum for independence, which was stolen from them? They didn't even try and hide the vote fraud. It was that much out in the open. They were saying exactly the same things about Scottish independence that they are about British independence. It's going to be disastrous for the economy. It's going to result in all these horrible things happening. Well, you can't let it happen. We have to stay the slaves of the British Empire, or horrible things will happen to the Loch Ness Monster will run amok and eat all of our children. It's a complete repeat of the same fear-mongering talking points all over again. Story coming out of Sputnik News. Poland is dying under European Union occupation, and they're already saying that if Great Britain succeeds in breaking free of the European Union, Poland is going to follow. A successful Brexit is also going to be triggering the push for the independence of Catalan over in Spain. I think this is a healthy trend. Anytime you have a giant globe-straddling empire, they do bad things. I think a planet Earth with 1,000 more or less equally sized nations, each taking care of their own people and their own culture, and trading and tourism across the borders, is the best option for the long-term survival of human civilization. And that's why I am adamantly opposed to a one-world government and a one-world private central bank, because it's a system of global enslavement. So, up to 500,000 refugee families could head to Britain using the European Union free movement rules after 2020. That's another reason to vote for Brexit. And no, it is not hate and intolerance. It is simply taking care of your own home. When you look at some of the stuff that's going on. Now, apparently down in Greece, they're moving some of their refugees into warehouses with minimal setup to take care of them. And the refugees are screaming, these things aren't even fit for animals. Horrible living conditions. I have a solution. Go home. But you have all these refugees who've been lured to Europe with all these promises of free stuff, and they get there, and it isn't what they want. And now we're going to commit violence until we get all the stuff we were promised. We didn't promise it to you. If the living conditions are that terrible, kindly feel free to go back home, where you were comfortable. Apparently, Dutch authorities are now giving $11,000 to refugees to go and buy furniture. It's amazing. Now, up in Denmark, there's been an ugly incident at a nature center. Muslim immigrants went on in there and stoned baby piglets to death. Drove a wooden stake through another one. Now, we have all these people out there saying that, you need to tolerate the Muslims. You're being racist otherwise. You have to display some tolerance for Muslim behavior. Cover up your body. You're inflaming those poor Muslim men and the rest of that. Well, as I said before in the show, tolerance is a two-way street. If you want us to tolerate the behavior of the refugees need to be equally tolerant of the fact that we who live here have our own ways of doing things. And we like to see scantily clad women on advertising and billboards and on TV. And we like pigs. Usually as food, occasionally as pets. But tolerance is a two-way street. And if you're not going to remember that, then you are not welcome. Because you're going to be a poor guest in our home. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Wes in Idaho. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Michael. Earlier, you were talking about equal pay or more pay being given to men at Microsoft. The book by Warren Farrell, Ph.D., Myth of Male Power. He was on the board of National Organization for Women for a time, and he went out speaking against men and realized that he wasn't helping things, and all of a sudden he stopped and said, hey, and so the book, Myth of Male Power. What I want to point out, I read the book years ago, and the reason that men were given preference for jobs for years, it was not just a tradition or a culture, it's because men are supposed to provide and protect for families.
Well, that's an old model. That's an old model there. But you need to understand there are a couple of other things that are going on here. In one very important way, the feminist movement let women down. And it was in their rush to prepare women for success, to convince them that they could be successful, that they deserve to be successful. And they didn't make an equal point of preparing them to fail. Now, when you're, at least in my generation, not so much now, in my generation, growing up, most of the team sports were for guys. And we got to go on out there, and we got to try, and we got to enjoy our victory, and we got to fall flat on our face in front of all of our friends and relatives, and we learned to deal with that. And that was an important part of our socialization. When we got into the feminist revolution in the 1990s, and you had all these women who were being told not that they had the freedom to enter the corporate world, but an obligation to other women to do so, and they went on in absolutely convinced that they were just going to walk on in and have immediate success, and it didn't happen. For the same reason that the majority of men never meet immediate success when they enter the business world. It's a very competitive situation. But whereas men understand that somebody's going to lose all of these little confrontations, and they went along with it, the women weren't prepared to deal with that frustration and failure. So they started screaming, patriarchy and male chauvinist pig, and it made for a very uncomfortable environment where a lot of people were just saying, I don't want to put up with this nonsense anymore. To have these females who are screeching that we are somehow cheating them because they're not getting what they immediately want to have. In a lot of ways, they were behaving like spoiled brats. And that's because they hadn't been through the same experiences that made men a little more flexible within that corporate environment. And I'm not saying that women don't have abilities and shouldn't be getting equal pay for equal work, but feminism really did them a disservice by creating this idea that merely by entering the business world, they were going to automatically be successful. And anything that they did to move forward was perfectly justified. And it was a false dichotomy. And it resulted in a lot of women getting promoted for political reasons to positions they really shouldn't have been in. And Michael Crichton wrote about this in his book Disclosure. And I got to tell you, it's a shame he's gone. The more I go back and read his original books, not the movies don't even begin to get into the richness of what he was writing. But Disclosure, State of Fear, Airframe, and you realize he was a modern-day prophet telling us where all these different agendas were falling apart. And he did it in Disclosure, just saying, and look what happened at Hewlett-Packard. When Carly Fiorina, politicked her way to being CEO, and she almost destroyed the company. And so a lot of people in business are out there now. It's backfired. They're leery of promoting women because they don't want to be seen as politically promoting people who are not competent.
I think you're ignoring the obvious. We aren't supposed to be pushing women out there to do men's jobs.
Well, Wes, thank you very much for the phone call, Wes. I want to make a point here. In the realm of physical exertion, yes, the average woman is not as strong, as fast as the average man. In an era of mechanical augmentation, bulldozers, whatever, women are equal. Let's just deal with that. But feminism actually caused a lot more damage than good on a lot of areas. And another good example was the rape hysteria, where they had so many women screaming false accusations of rape, the net result was real victims wound up being ignored even more than before. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And yes, if you're trying to get to the website, it's currently under hacking attack by presumably Hillary's $1 million goon squad. And my ISP is recommending a new security system. Unfortunately, it does not come under my current fees. So we're going to be out of pocket for a lot of money to try and head these people off. So donations are welcome and needed at this particular point. Now, let's get on back here. As you know, one of the weapons of the Hillary Clinton campaign against Donald Trump is this lawsuit against the Trump University. And it's a civil action, and there are precious few details about what's going on. And let's do that. Okay. Now, precious few details have come out about what the lawsuit's all about. And nobody really knows that much what it's about. But it's a constant thing by the Dump Trump, Hillary Clinton campaign. There's a lawsuit against the Trump University. There's a lawsuit. How evil, he's got a lawsuit. Well, turns out there's a backstory to that. The law firm that is behind this civil action lawsuit against the Trump University, Robbins, Geller, Rudman, and Dowd, paid the Clintons a total of $675,000 in fees for speeches since 2009. Hillary gave them a speech as recently as September 4th, 2014. These are part of Hillary's goons. That's what's going on. Now then, apparently at yes, I know, the deposition for Cheryl Mills. Lawyers for Cheryl Mills, who are lawyers actually for Hillary, are out there basically had a contentious deposition trying to find out what was going on. One of the things they came on out there is Hillary Clinton's lawyers are trying to block questioning now on Brian Pagliini about just how the server was set up. Why is this so sensitive if it's just an email server? That's the big question. Why the big stink over how the server was set up if it's just an email server? They've just telegraphed to the world this server was set up to be wide open to those who made the Clintons happy somehow. They're having to hide something about how the server was set up. That's what's going on here. That's what's going on. It's amazing. All righty. Now then, zipping on back to immigration, Martin Armstrong is warning the rise of nationalism throughout Europe is inevitable. And he's absolutely right. All of this refugee, illegal immigrant pouring people across the borders has triggered a strong nationalistic backlash. America for Americans. France for the French. Germany for the Germans. Italy for the Italians. We're tired of being culturally enriched by all these people from south of the border or the Middle East who are coming on in and demanding we change our society to meet their expectations. And the constant drumbeat is nationalism is bad, it's out of fashion. Really, you should be thinking about that one world government. Well, if this is how we're going to live under the one world government, thank you, no, I don't want a part of it. Now, Camille Paglia has come on out with a very cogent observation about this whole transgender mania and how ridiculous it has just reached. And basically says, going back, saying, even with sex reassignment surgery, you're still the gender you were born with. It's in your DNA, and all the whacking with knives is not going to change that. And she goes back and says, when you look at history, when a culture begins to decline, you see a flowering of all this talk about gender and transgender and blending. It's a symptom of cultural collapse. I agree with her. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm reading more details on this contentious deposition of Cheryl Mills that apparently happened last Friday. And Cheryl Mills had her attorney, Department of Justice had their attorney, and they would basically out there say, you know, outside of scope, I'm instructing the witness not to answer, just literally screaming at each other. They don't want this hearing to go where it's obviously there's a problem. They're trying to kill this thing completely. And what they don't seem to understand is when they go to this extremes, it's sending a clear, unequivocal message to the American people, there's something being covered up here. What could be so damaging about how an email server was set up if it was just an email server? Why scream and block and throw tantrums and the rest of it? There's clearly something going on here. They don't want to come on out. I think I know what it is. In fact, I'm convinced I know what it is. All I'm looking for is the proof now. And again, go back to 1996 and the China Gate scandal. They've done it before. They sold out U.S. secrets to foreign governments in exchange for donations. And nothing happened to them. So why wouldn't Hillary be doing it again? Take a phone call here, Matt in Colorado. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. This is kind of maybe a little bit slightly off subject, but extremely relevant to all of us. I was doing a conference call with a gentleman in Sweden and some guys in Mexico, and I'm in the United States, in Colorado, obviously. And, you know, we were having connectivity issues. Mm-hmm. And so Mexico was having the connectivity issues, and I asked my friend in Sweden, can you do a speed test? And I used the website, www.speedtest.net. Mm-hmm. And I had an 18 to 20 megabit per second download.
Okay.
And that's a little bit slow, but I'm not paying for premium service. And he's in Sweden, and he had 132 megabits per second download. And I was just wondering what you guys run on in Hawaii, being on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and what your speed is, and if you have any comments on that. Because I think the internet and, you know, is really the key to modern-day democracy, and that's the greatest threat, in my opinion, if that breaks down.
Well, they're trying to break it down. I mean, even the UN is starting to realize that their tyrannical control over the globe falls apart because the Internet represents the purest expression of a true democracy we've ever seen in history. Now, regarding bandwidth, here in Hawaii, Time Warner Cable, which is, I guess, going through a rename, they got acquired by another company after the Comcast merger fell apart. And the normal base rate into the home is 50 megabits per second download speed, but you can buy accelerated services, which we do. We've got the fastest that you can get, short of going to a DSL line or something. No, not DSL, the DHCP. I can't remember the acronym. There's another system that you can get that's a little bit faster, but we're at the high end of what you can get with Time Warner Oceanic. The upload speeds are much slower. The system is biased for downloaders and content delivery. And but that's what we have out here. I understand that in Europe and Asia, the standard speeds into the home at the consumer level are leaving the U.S. in the dust. And what we have seen over the last several years is that Internet service providers and cell phone providers, rather than actually improving the speed of the system, they just keep changing the definitions. And I remember when here in Hawaii, the high speed first came in, and then there was one more. There was the number 3, and then there was the number 4. And when we got to 4, it was at the same speed. And we went back to the store, and they said, well, yeah, actually it is, but we wanted to sell more phones. And so they keep telling us we've got fast internet, but if you actually compare it to what's going on in other parts of the world, they're leaving us in the dust because we're in a war economy. We're in a war economy. Everything is being put into bombs, bullets, and butter, and they're just letting our nation rot on the vine. And especially when you look at the fact that we're probably going to lose this war, it's the United States as a world leader in technology, we're never going to see that again in our lifetime.
Well, yeah, I think I was reading something on your website earlier today, and it was talking about that the innovators, primarily in technology, have been, the Steve Jobs and so forth, that are Americans. And if I've got 18 to 20 megabytes per second download, and in Sweden they have 132 and you got 50, and I'm already paying my cable provider and my ISP, that is totally embarrassing. And I think that's part of the overall objective. I'm really worried about the internet because I think that's what
I don't think it's an attack on our ability to communicate because, we can go back to very lightweight applications and lightweight data. We don't need to be sending huge, gigantic 7-megapixel images. We can get by just fine with 300K, or we can compress a little bit more. I think it's just simple economics. All of these corporations are realizing there's a crash coming. They don't want to put any investment into their lines or anything. They're just paying off their stockholders to keep them happy, and they're writing themselves huge, huge bonuses. I mean, the ratio of executive pay to worker pay in this country is already obscene and getting worse. And they really don't want to worry about what the company's going to be dealing with after their own time in office is over. They're there for a fast buck. They want to retire, hang out on Jeff Epstein's island down there in the Caribbean, and whatever happens to the company afterwards, they could care less. We saw that with Carly Fiorina. She almost destroyed Hewlett-Packard, but she left and she got her money and she got on out of there. Okay?
Yeah, that's totally negligent irresponsibility, and that's not what we should be doing as Americans.
No, I absolutely agree with you on that. Well, listen, Matt, thank you very much for the phone call. We're coming to the end of the show. I got a bunch of stuff to cover here. I'm obviously not going to get through the entire talking points today. So let's talk about the second most hated agency in the United States government, the Tourism Suppression Agency, the TSA. And as we are now into the official summer travel season, the TSA is scrambling resources to deal with the long lines of travelers. And again, don't forget, the Inspector General at the Department of Homeland Security has admitted undercover operators that were sent in to test TSA were able to slip through the lines with phony bombs and guns 95% of the time. Now keep that in mind. The TSA is now out there saying that it's really your fault. The lines are long. It's all the fault of the people, the passengers. You only have yourselves to blame here. You should come up to the TSA checkpoint fully prepared for everything that we're going to do to you. And I can just see the new rules out there. Rule number 1, no luggage. None. Not even a carry-on. If we have to check luggage, it's just going to slow everybody down. Rule number 2, no clothing. If everybody is naked, then we don't have to pat you down or run you through the scanners, do we? See? If you would just do what we tell you, things would be better. And remember, these rules are for your benefit. No, they're not. There's an article over in economyandmarkets.com where it's saying basically TSA messed up because they established this TSA pre-check, or what they're calling TSA pre for short. And they were expecting that by this time, pretty much all of America would be on it. TSA has cut their staff by more than 10% on the presumption that Americans were just going to sign up for this thing. And the TSA's attitude is, what is so difficult about this? You pay us $85, you come into the TSA, you sit down with an interviewer, you show the passport, and you answer some questions, and we give you a number that will let you skip the lines. What's wrong with that? Well, most Americans already feel that the government is way too intrusive. They already have way too much information. And besides, don't they already have this? Wasn't that the whole point of the NSA and total information awareness, that you already know this about us? Why do we have to tell you a second time and give you $85? Is this just another way for the government to shake us down for more money, and we're not going to go along with that? Or are you admitting to us that the NSA spying and total information awareness were a complete waste of taxpayer money and didn't work, and that's why you need us to come in and fill out your questionnaire? It's one or the other. And if anybody from the TSA wants to phone into the show and explain which one it is, I would be happy to take that phone call. Because you don't get it both ways, where the NSA and total information awareness knows everything about everybody, but you still need us to come on in and fill out a piece of paper. I think it's a protection racket. You know, if you don't pay this the $85 protection money or the pre-check money, then something bad's going to happen, like maybe you're going to miss your flight, or maybe your luggage is going to get broken into, and things are going to go missing. Don't you really want a little protection? It's what it is. And the reality here is that people are not signing up for pre-check just out of a sense of resentment at having to go through this in the first place. And TSA did their hiring and firing and planning and security gates on the assumption that Americans were just going to line up and shovel over the $85 and fill out the paperwork. And you know something? They did this before. There have been these various get-around-the-line programs before. They were all canceled after a while, so why should we believe this one? They'll just come up with another one down the road for another $85 or $150. Robert Heinlein, one of my favorite science fiction writers of all time, made an observation that when a society requires more than 3 forms of identification to function, it's on the edge of collapse. And we're already with that just with the TSA. You've got your ticket, it's a form of identification. You've got your driver's license, your passport. Now they want you to have your TSA pre-code number card. That's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. Here in Hawaii, if we're going inter-island, it's a real problem. We have to wait in line for TSA for 2 hours for a plane flight that's going to last 20 minutes. Does that make any sense at all? And it's on an airplane that couldn't possibly go anywhere but its destination, the next rock over. We're just hopping from one dead volcano to the next dead volcano. It's not like somebody could take one of these little turboprop airplanes and fly it to Los Angeles. TSA is like all other government programs, a huge, hideous waste of money, seriously inconveniencing the American people, and totally useless. They have not actually caught a real terrorist even once in the 15 years of their operation. If you had a job performance record like that, how long do you think you would keep your job? And the good news is, some of these airports are starting to kick the TSA out and hire their own private security companies to get people through faster. Besides, the whole war on terror is a fiction. There really aren't terrorists out there trying to kill us, just the actors. Remember the underwear bomber, the crotch bomber? Witnesses said he was walked around the airport security and put on the plane. It's all fake and phony, and I am sick and tired of putting up with this nonsense. It's theater, and it's bad theater. No Tony Awards for this bunch of bozos. Now then, getting on to human-caused global warming, you are not going to believe this one. As you know, back in the 1990s, the carbon Nazis were out there screaming that because of human-caused global warming, snowfalls would be a thing of the past. That didn't happen. Sea levels would rise. That was didn't happen. And the polar ice caps were going to melt, especially in Antarctica. You remember I think it was like 2 years ago? They sent a ship down to Antarctica to document the melting Antarctic ice, which promptly got trapped in the ice sheet and had to be rescued. So here we have a classic case of a theory that is being used to justify carbon taxes that does not predict what's going on in the real world. But we must cling to the theory because we're clinging to the carbon tax, and the latest explanation for why we should go on believing in human-caused global warming, even though the Antarctic and Arctic ice sheets have been growing, is a theory called old water. Oh my God. See, down deep at the bottom of the ocean, there's old water, and it's very cold. That part is correct. There was actually a company on the Big Island that was trying to generate electricity from the temperature differential between the deep ocean cold water and the surface warm water. And it worked in theory, but not enough to pencil out economically. But it was a good system. They did a lot of cool stuff with that. So their theory is there's this cold water down in the bottom of the ocean, and it's welling up and keeping Antarctica frozen. Okay, how? The reason the water is cold at the bottom of the ocean is cold water sinks, warm water rises. And now we're supposed to think this cold water is just crawling up the cliffs at the edge of Antarctica all by itself to keep the ice frozen? It's amazing how many of these articles are written by people who clearly do not have a scientific education. And here's another one. This came out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain, how climate change is making food crops poisonous. Extreme weather is increasing the level of toxins in food. So you don't want to eat that food that's growing out there in nature. You want your GMO seeds from Monsanto. Actually, I think that's what's increasing poisons in food, was this tinkering with DNA and everything. And the good news, of course, is Donald Trump has said that he's going to pull out of this whole UN climate nonsense, and he's right to do so. It has been a huge and costly experiment. They were expecting a payback with the increase in carbon taxes. But what are they going to do with the carbon taxes? Spend it on what they've spent all the other tax money on. Israel, Wall Street, and the wars. They actually had carbon credit sales going on in Europe, did not change the climate one tiny bit. It was just a money-making scam. When Al Gore set up the carbon trading system, he had the help of Enron's Ken Lay. They planned to do with Earth, with electricity, what Enron had done to California with electricity. And that's exactly what it is. It's a gigantic scam. Al Gore ended the 2000 campaign broke. Now he's approaching being a billionaire, all on carbon. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. I'm looking at an email coming in from a listener who went through that TSA pre-check, $85 and the interview and everything, and said 11 out of the last 12 times that they flew, they had to go through the regular lines anyway. It's a scam. It's a scam. Okay, so anyway, getting on back here. Hillary Clinton is back to blaming Bernie Sanders' success on sexism. It's all you woman haters out here. You're voting for Bernie just because you hate women. You can't stand to have a woman as president. And they keep going back to that time and time again. I get it all the time from people. You just hate women. No, I love women. Ask my wife. The Amen Choir back there. If John McCain had tapped Hawaii's former governor, Linda Lingle, as vice president, I would have supported her. I don't have a problem with a woman as president. I have a problem with certain individuals as president, regardless of whether they're male or female. I'm opposed to Hillary as president based on what she has done, not what her gender is. I was opposed to Ted Cruz because he didn't meet the constitutional requirements, and not because he was a guy. I was opposed to Carly Fiorina as president because of what she did to Hewlett-Packard. We need to stop treating our elections like a fashion show and go back to meritocracy. That's what we need. People who can actually make the country work, as opposed to our current political establishment, who have lived lives of royalty and as a result don't know how to do much of anything except take money away from one group and give it to another. And yes, some of them play decent golf and occasionally can drive a boat around a harbor, and that's about it. Washington, D.C. is notoriously devoid of anybody who actually knows how to do anything, like build a building, start a business, set up a secure email server. Now, speaking of which, the State Department's former top watchdog, the guy who had the IG position before, Howard Krongard, George W. Bush administration appointee, basically was on an interview with Fox TV and rejected the idea or rejected the claim that Hillary Clinton has made that her personal email use was in line with her predecessors, saying that he would have immediately opened an investigation if he'd caught word of a Secretary of State using such an account. Now, Hillary is trying to blur the line about what's going on. She's out there saying previous Secretaries of State had personal email accounts. Yes, that's true, for their private, non-business email. The difference here is Hillary had a private email server. No previous Secretary of State ever had that. It's another one of her lies. At some point, there's going to be a spark where the American people are just going to say, okay, enough is enough is enough. We've had it with all the lies of these politicians. They have to go, starting with Hillary Clinton. There's the music. Time for me to do the Jim Goddard Show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here in the Republic Broadcasting Network. So until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, share what you know with everybody that you know, and aloha, America.